We're going to get started, and I just want to say Erev Tov and good evening to all of you. I'm going to ask all of you now that we're starting, and we are live on Facebook as well as our Zoom, to please mute yourselves so we can give Cantor Ostfeld all of our attention. So again, Erev Tov, good evening to all of you, and thank you so much, all of you on Zoom and those of you watching us on Facebook Live, for participating in part one of a three-part series launched this evening entitled Sing Your Song, The Evolution of the Cantorate. I am Cantor Lisa Siegel and proudly serve Temple Beth Shalom of Miami Beach. It is my hope that this series will...
How about that?
All right, we're going to mute. It's my hope that this series will provide you with a fascinating look at the Cantorate through the lens of our esteemed guests. I have been very excited this evening to interview Cantor Barbara Ostfeld. I have been a great admirer from afar, not only of her contributions to our movement, but for her magnetic personality and incredible sense of humor. I'm a little jealous. She's a little funnier than me. At age 17, she challenged the notion that only male voices could inspire Jewish worship, and her determination and perseverance changed the face of the American Cantorate. At age 22, she became the first woman ordained as cantor in our 3,000 years of Jewish history. Cantor Ostfeld served several congregations and also as director of cantorial placement for the American Conference of Cantors for many years. In fact, Cantor Ostfeld oversaw my placement process when I applied for a position at Temple Beth Shalom. Today, the landscape has changed a lot since she started. Today, almost 65% of our cantors are women, something that Cantor Ostfeld will, I'm sure, speak about. Following retirement, she wrote and published her own personal memoir, Catbird, The Ballad of Barbie Prim, which you can see on my background. We're going to post it in our chat so that you can order it. It's an open, honest account of her sacred journey, and I highly recommend you reading it. Please, I'd like to direct your attention to this beautiful clip that I want to show. It was first shown at the 2019 URJ Biennial Convention when she received the Debbie Friedman Award for contributions to Jewish music.
History when she became the first woman ordained as a cantor.
When Cantor Ostfeld arrived in the cantorial program, she was surrounded by male students who were her contemporaries and also by men who had long held positions on the faculty of great distinction and who had never taught women students before.
When she received her ordination, she blazed a path for the hundreds of Jewish women who would follow her lead in entering the Reform Cantorate.
The biggest thing my mom has owed upon us is just all-encompassing love, and we now get to bring that into our own lives and, put it out into the world.
Cantor Barbara Ostfeld has been, for decades, one of the most exemplary voices in progressive American Jewish life. It's not only that she brought the sound of a female voice to the cantorate, it's also that she became a spokesperson for social justice, for equality, for moral conscience.
She served for 27 years as the cantor of congregations in Clifton, New Jersey, and Great Neck, Rochester, and Buffalo, New York, before becoming the placement director of the American Conference of Cantors, helping to forge matches between cantors and congregations throughout North America.
She really always instilled in us that
Judaism was such, was part of her soul and her heart.
Going to the grocery store with her, like people just stopping her and saying, how much they appreciated her coming to the hospital, or hearing what a beautiful voice she had, or just, congregates that I run into on my own, just telling me how much she's impacted their life is just amazing.
Now retired, Cantor Ostfeld shared her powerful personal story in her 2019 memoir, Catbird. These days, the Reformed Cantorate is more than 300 women strong, and it was Cantor Barbara Ostfeld who paved the way.
In the words of Rabbi Danny Friedlander at that convention, he said, Cantor Ostfeld, you are the Nachshon, the Miriam, and the Deborah of the Cantorate. So it gives me great pleasure to bring you, Cantor, into our living rooms this evening. Please welcome everyone, Cantor Barbara Ostfeld.
Thank you so much. It's really so nice to be here with my dear friend Cantor Lisa Siegel and with Temple Beth Shalom in Miami Beach. It's certainly an honor to participate in part one of Cantor Siegel's three-part discussion of the evolution of the Cantorate. And I'm going to introduce myself to you using a prop. Here it is. Catbird, The Ballad of Barbie Prim, which is my memoir, as was mentioned earlier. And you can see that at least in my frame, the sweater that I'm wearing and the catbird are the same color. We clash a little bit with Cantor Siegel's screen, but I can handle it if you can. So this memoir rivals Michelle Obama's for deeply personal reckoning and Barack Obama's for drama and turmoil. Okay, I'm lying, but it's still a good memoir. Buy it. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Catbird. This is what happened in New York City in the spring of 1969 when I was 17. And that's not a musical cue, but if you want to just sing it to yourselves, when I was 17, it was a... Anyway, you get it. And this is the excerpt from Catbird. There is no phys ed requirement at Hebrew Union College School of Sacred Music, and no math requirement either. I know, I looked at the school's tiny catalog. These are assets, huge assets. I arrived for my audition at the Upper West Side address where the school is located, and I like the building. It's old, it's kind of shabby. A courtly man in a three-piece suit meets me in the lobby and introduces himself to me as Cantor Behrman. We take an elevator up to the 4th floor and walk down a corridor into the audition room. It's a small, unimpressive classroom, less impressive than any of my high school classrooms. And that surprises me. This is college, right? The piano is old and scratched up, so I'm guessing it's going to be out of tune. Even though this is a music school, it's still not a conservatory, but the shabbiness also relaxes me. This place isn't fancy or formal enough to scare me, even though I might be rejected because I'm a girl. The other two cantors sitting here in the audition room are dressed in black, shiny black, with shiny black yarmulkes. Two of them have hollows under their eyes, and they look like supernatural characters out of Isaac Bashevis Singer. Maybe they're Dibbocks. Except for the three-piece suit guy. They look like they've seen horrors or better days or something. I feel like I'm on a field trip to the Lower East Side. I see them all look at the hemline of my dress. I know it's short. I know it's light blue with ribbing, baby doll sleeves, and buttons down the front. My hair is separated into weak, snaky coils, and it does what it pleases down my back. My eyeshadow, of course, matches my dress. One of the Dibbuks looks fierce, but I smile sweetly at him and then look down quickly. Please stand here, Miss Ostfeld, says Three-Piece, motioning toward a music stand that's barely upright. Will you sing something for us? Excuse me one sec. I feel quite prepared for the singing part. I've already been to Eastman and Oberlin, so I'm going to use the same material here for my audition. I hand my music to Three-Piece, who clearly will be my accompanist, and I see him stifle a smile as he looks at my opening piece, which is the Neapolitan Baroque song, Vergine tutto amor. And then I get the smile. I've chosen a long prayer to the Virgin Mary for my cantorial school audition. F word, I thought to myself. He begins. He plays a little stiffly, but he follows me well enough. No one has any facial expression, which is what I'm used to. I sing it well and go right on, sticking to the script I prepared for my conservatory auditions. I announce a Debussy piece. After this, Cantor Three-Piece asks me if I know anything in Hebrew. I don't, and I'm caught red-handed. I stammer something incoherent. Three-Piece persists, though, asking me if I know the Kiddush. Sure, I reply. He plays a flourish, and I begin singing it through easily. The Dybbuk seems surprised, which surprises me, since I've been singing the Kiddush since I was 7, and now I'm feeling my oats. So I ask if they'd like me to play my piano selections. At this, the hovering cantors lose their unearthly pallor and actually pink up. I assume from their reaction that few other candidates have demonstrated keyboard skills. The bench is from some other piano, but the instrument itself turns out to be in tune, and I play 2 short Bach pieces, Inventions number 4 and 8. Will my well-behaved fingers compensate for the fact that I can hardly distinguish between an aleph and a bet? It's time for the interview and my heart starts to thump. I feel like a pretender, even though this place looks like crap. Miss Ostfeld, one of the Dibbuks starts, looking at my transcript on the desk in front of him, as if to confirm my name. Why is it that you really want to get into this school? I want to be a cantor, like my cantor, Martin Rosen. They exchange glances, eyebrows lifted, and there are small nods and smaller blinks of assent. And then Three-Piece asks me to read some Hebrew. Okay, I guess they haven't read my essay. I'm doomed. I can't read Hebrew, I say softly, apologetically. I was never taught. They weren't big on bat mitzvah in my temple. Here, let's see what you can do. Start here, he says, opening the Union prayer book and pointing to a passage. Equipped by my many years of Friday evening Shabbat services, I instantly recognize the prayer. I can say this prayer, but I'm not reading it, not really. I recite the prayer smoothly from memory with unanticipated accuracy, and the Dibbuks nod. I look down and make sure that my knees are still pressed tightly together. And then the audition is over. They thank me and I thank them, imagining that once I've left the room, they will cackle and then fly off to Lublin for tea and glasses with the sugar cube between their teeth. When I go to leave, the door sticks and I press harder, twisting the knob farther. The door doesn't budge. I push my body against it. Nothing. Three-Piece asks if I need a hand, and I say that the door seems to be stuck. He comes to help and we push together. It jerks open and I am popped out into the hallway, which is crammed full of students. I'm face to face with the ones right in front of me who have obviously been pressing up against the door, listening. As I look at the small sea of men, they begin to part. lining the walls of the fourth floor hallway, and some of them are abashed, having been caught eavesdropping, and some just smile and look away and then back. It's quiet, which is surprising considering how many of them there are and how narrow the hallway is, but I can tell that it's a good quiet, a thoughtful quiet. I'm at home in this quiet and in this press of skinny super Jews, seminary students with long hair and frayed jeans. I feel like their younger sister. One of them says, "We were just trying to hear the first woman cantor sing." And a great slippery bubble inflates in my chest and then tries to settle. I blink, expecting the hallway scene to vanish. I look again at this host of guys. There are many pairs of glasses reflecting the fluorescent bulbs in the hallway ceiling. My spine tingles. And I know I will somehow be that, the first female cantor. So by 1975, I was not the only woman singing from a bema, but I was the only ordained female cantor. And as Lisa said earlier, in 2020, there were nearly 600 of us, and we may have crossed over that 600 mark. But there are 600 of us who are credentialed, that is certified by an accredited seminary, like Cantor Siegel and like me. So talk about the evolution of the cantorate over the last 50 years. Talk about a complete revolution in the cantorate that we've become dominant. So I'm happy to answer any questions, field any questions, and I'm going to turn the virtual microphone back to Cantor Siegel.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. I loved hearing the book just now as much as I loved reading it before. So I have some prepared questions, and I'm going to also encourage any of you, if you'd like to type any questions you have for Cantor in the chat box as well, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So Cantor, you just read from your memoir. How did you know it was time to write it? And I also want to add that, you know, anyone who's read it knows that you have revealed yourself in a very vulnerable way. You were very honest in your book. What was your incentive for doing that as well? And tell us a little bit about the book and what got you there.
Well, I've never answered this question this way, but this is just my reality. I'd always kept journals. I kept diaries from the time I was fairly little, so that I had a way of getting back into certain memories, certain times in my life. So that was a shortcut. But I had a professor at Hebrew Union College who put a note in all of our mailboxes one day saying that he was going to be he was going to be out for a while, that he had broken his leg, admitted to himself that he was an alcoholic. And when I realized the enormity of that, this is this revered public figure, travels all over the world, one of the great scholars in his field. I was so moved by his willingness to say, I'm an alcoholic. I am a respected professor of blank, but this is also who I am. That really got me. And I thought, I have stories to tell about how hard it was growing up female in the 50s and 60s. And I think a number of people, men and women, will relate to my stories, to my experiences. And I also am am a rape survivor and thought that my describing the scene would perhaps have an uplifting effect on other people in similar abusive situations. And I also, my main message is I'm a huge mental health advocate. I'm a person who has suffered from anxiety and depression. And I'm sure like many people on this call, or like at least some people on this call, and I've been in psychotherapy under the care of a psychiatrist for many, many years. And so part of the story is that story, the story of going from feeling like a worthless, ugly, unimpressive, overweight kid to a rape survivor, to a figure at least known at least among American Reform cantors. So
you're even in Wikipedia. You're in Wikipedia, you know.
Yeah. So that, you know, is very cool, and I'm very proud of that. But so that's basically why I decided I needed to be real and to indicate to people that although cantors stand, or we used to anyway, in the pulpit in front of congregations, singing holy words, chanting holy texts, that we are people, and we are flawed people, and we are serious, focused people, but we also contend with the realities of everyday life. And heaven knows during the pandemic, that's been a challenge for many of us.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor. That's, yeah, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, what did it mean to be the only woman at that time in the program? And let me just finish the question. You can just talk about all of these. How long before another woman was in the school? What were the challenges that you faced musically? What did they even know what to do about your voice?
So during my audition, I described the sea of men. That's what it was like. It was a sea of men. And there were no women. There were 2 women on the faculty, but otherwise there were no women in the building except for administrators and office workers. And they were on a different floor. So I was really isolated, and I was very young, and it was very lonely. So I used to come to school early and stay late. The very next year, however, when I was only a second-year student, 2 other women entered the program. So I had, you know, that essential camaraderie that I think we all need from time to time. And no, they did not know, Lisa, what to do with us in the School of Sacred Music choir. At the first year, during rehearsals and for all the performances, I was told to mouth the words. So I was basically Milli Vanilli. Did I get that right? I don't know. But by the 3rd year, we were allowed to sing, and they tried to create some kind of an ensemble blend, which probably sounded terrible, but nonetheless, they accommodated. The other thing that I should say is that almost all the classes started out by our teachers saying something like, boys, it's time to, you know. So it's like, okay. I mean, they were just so used to saying boys, and that continued, that persisted.
Wow. So once you were out, and this is something that I picked up from your book, and there are some very funny vignettes in your book about the important women at the temple who wanted to help you get spruced up with the right clothes and makeup. And can you talk about that part you wrote about?
Well, I had to make up a lot of things about what it was to be a woman in the clergy. And I did a very bad job. I basically dressed like I dressed like the hippie I was in high school because those were my clothes. And when I was ordained, I definitely stepped up my act, but that meant that I went to Sears and bought 2 identical outfits, one in peach and one in aqua, and thought I was dressed up. So the women, fancy women in the congregation in Great Neck, New York, which in those days was very, very fancy, took me aside. And clearly they'd been told to do that. I don't know, by the rabbi, by the ritual committee, by who knows. And they took me to do my makeup, and they took me shopping to show me the kinds of things that I really should be wearing, but they weren't paying, and I couldn't afford it because, like, what is it, 70-something% of women in this country, I was underpaid and overworked. I'm grateful for having been through that now, but I certainly feel, particularly for women of color who make so much less to the dollar than white guys. So they tried to dress me up, and there are a few amusing stories about how badly that failed.
It's very amusing in the book. Okay, how about how does it make you feel knowing that you were the pioneer, setting that, the fact that now women outnumber men in the cantorate? Do you feel responsible for that?
What I really think is that it was an accident of timing. I grew up like so many Jewish kids do, and you all can think of 1 or 2 in your congregation, if not more, little boys or little girls who love to be up on the bima, love to sing in the children's choir, like Sunday school. I know that's totally weird, but and feel that certain something, and you can see it on their faces when they sing in the children's choir. I was that kid. I loved being in synagogue. Loved it, felt at home and comfortable. And I can recall the childhood smells from my synagogue. That's how profound it was. And so I felt as though when I was interviewing for admission to the School of Sacred Music at Hebrew Union College, and as I said when I read the vignette, I was also auditioning at music schools. I wanted to be a cantor. I wanted to be a cantor. And I didn't know until I applied to the school that no woman had ever asked for an application to the cantorial school before me. So I think about this as I'm a really good example of a person who was in the right place at the right time, because if it hadn't been me in that particular year, it would have been some other Jewish kid who liked to sing and felt good in temple, who said, "This is what I want. This is how I want to spend my life."
Okay, I'm going to ask you my last question, and then I'm going to ask some of the questions that people have posted. You had several pulpit positions, and then you spent many years as the director of placement for the American Conference of Cantors. So, you're the one to ask, how does the role of the cantor today differ from the past? And because there's been a real journey, evolution, as I should say. I'd like you to address that.
I was on a webinar yesterday that was presented by several professors at Hebrew Union College.
All right.
And one of the things that was discussed was the notion that we are living through the kind of transition that changes the shape of Judaism as we know it. And one of the professors commented that, you know, the synagogue is basically a 19th century invention. It served a particular purpose in Europe and in this country, and throughout North America. And then when the 20th century came, we kind of clung to the same old model. And, you know, maybe we had some modern architecture and maybe eventually some new prayer books. Basically, the prayer model was this Germanic, European formal presentation where the cantor was supposed to be pretty much still. And then all of a sudden, Debbie Friedman, and I think the signature piece is her Ve'ahavta, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God. So what she did was she took liturgical text and she made it immediate by translating it as she well, in this case, as she sang the English, but in many of her other pieces, she juxtaposed the liturgical text, the Hebrew text or the Torah text with its translation. And so you're getting it as you say it, like reading in English, except that when you're singing, it's a whole other means of communication and means of sharing the sacred space with other like-minded people who are similarly focused, and it took off. And so synagogue music has basically changed worship completely. If you think back to your childhoods, even those of you who might be pretty young, you can feel the difference. And now, I don't know, a lot of services start with breathing, and that would have been so far out, you know, for somebody who grew up in the classical reform movement, where we were literally singing, "Hear my prayer, oh, hear my prayer, lead me that I go aright. Only by thy guiding flame, safe my footsteps in life's night." That was an actual solo I had as a child. I mean, where did that come from? That was the dominant style in Reform worship in the 50s and 60s, 70s, changed a little bit with Debbie Friedman. And then boom, you know, it's guitar and percussion and a kind of a silky transition from prayer to prayer that is really cemented by music. And so the cantor has become what the cantor always used to be in the shtetls of Europe before fancy synagogues, the one who leads prayer. And it's been a, you know, from being the singer who would just stand up and, as they say, park and bark, to being this a person who basically has to pull everyone together with music, one word at a time, and make of them the community that they are, essentially. So it has been a total revolution in worship, and we are on the cusp of yet another one. And we will see where this leads us, but certainly virtual worship will not go away. It works very well for certain people, just as virtual learning does. But I mean, as an old person, I don't want to lose that the touch, the physical touch, the shaking of hands, the hugging, the looking in each other's eyes. And it's not a little dot, it's not a little light in the center of my screen. I actually get to meet your eyes. So I'm waiting to see how this thing shakes out.
I think we're all yearning for that very badly. I think my sisters are on this, and I think they could remember our father sitting in our classical Reform synagogue in Michigan with the Union Prayer Book as he belted out, "All the world shall come to serve thee and bless thy glorious name." I could go on, but I won't. But yeah, it just reminded me.
Absolutely, right?
Right. So I also wanted you to address that question also off the pulpit, just about what the role is of the cantor. Maybe does it differ today? As far as what cantors do in relation to their rabbinic colleagues. Can you just address that as well?
So the easiest way to do that is to just relate my personal experience. When I was growing up in a Reform synagogue, the cantor did services and taught Hebrew, taught the B'nai Mitzvah, prepared them to lead worship themselves, and taught them Torah text and taught them prophetic text and the brachot that have to be chanted in a particular way. And then they did some adult ed, perhaps had choirs. In synagogues in those days, there were lots of choirs, a youth choir, a kid choir, an adult volunteer choir, perhaps a professional choir. The choral work and choral music were very important. The thing that I don't think I realized as a child was the heavy duty role that cantors play in life cycle events, in communal gatherings, in social justice efforts, to bring their seminary knowledge, their knowledge of text, and their the connection with the congregation, the communal spirit, and the music, to all of these things. But I had no idea that the cantor of the 70s going forward, the 1970s and going forward, was someone who had full clergy status, who could officiate at weddings and eulogize and be that clergy person standing next to a rabbi who offers a particular part of himself or herself that's approachable in a different way. And that is an excellent compliment in most situations to rabbinic leadership, so that you have cantorial leadership that tastes different than rabbinic leadership. And together, they cement a community and grow a community and help a community find its Jewish values. But boy, I basically knew about the teaching of Hebrew and service and officiation at services. It was all ceremonial stuff. I had no idea that the day-to-day life is enmeshed in the lives of the members of the congregation, the way that it has become.
Right. I often joke sometimes that probably 10% of what I do is actually singing.
Exactly. And I think we all learned that the minute we left school. It was like, oh yeah, the singing is nothing. I don't have time to even warm up. I'm,
Right.
teaching.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to address some of these wonderful questions. Debbie Sussman wrote, since our meeting in 1983, there has been a profound transition in the type of music in the synagogue, formal to camp to more campy, and now it seems to invites more participation of families and students. Have all synagogues and cantors easily embraced the changing music?
Debbie, that's a great question. I think what happened was a natural sort of organic evolution of this kind of worship. That was, a cantor would be pressured in those days to sing a Debbie Friedman piece. The cantor would sing the Debbie Friedman piece, and all of a sudden, the young people in the congregation perked up, started singing, and then people, like, they learned it. They were able to sing along, and the cantor's thinking, well, this is an interesting energy. It's not just me and then you responding. It's all of us inside the liturgy together. And I think once that kind of music got a foothold, it was just a straight shot from there. And of course, it's been difficult. There are congregations that want to hear all the world shall come to serve thee, and instead they're hearing nigunim, wordless melodies with I da di di di, and they're like, so. But I think, and this is an interesting time too, because you can zoom into a service wherever on the planet, pretty much. You'll hear the same kinds of services. Shabbat to Shabbat, with not a lot of rote reading. No one says we read responsively as they did in my youth. It has a better flow. It has a more organic flow. And I think that started with the music, and with the music in particular of Debbie Friedman.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Scott asked, how did you know to apply to HUC? Was it not a requirement to have a BA degree? Well, okay. Or back then, was HUC more like a conservatory like Juilliard or Berkeley? And obviously not knowing Hebrew wasn't a problem. Today, applicants are told to have working knowledge of Hebrew. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's been, as much as there's been a revolution in the cantorate and a revolution in worship, and I'm not just talking about Jewish worship. I mean, everything is all kinds of worship have evolved in a similar way. When I applied to the school, which I knew to do only by calling the cantor of my childhood and asking him, and he just laughed and he said, they're not going to take you. You're a girl, they're not going to take you. But Rabbi Sally Presand, at that point, Sally Presand had already been admitted to the rabbinical program in Cincinnati. And so she was the one who really, shattered the ceiling. And I think once they had admitted her, it was like, well, on what basis would we not admit the next applicant? But when I was in school and for a few years thereafter, so in the 70s, late 60s and early 70s, it was basically an undergraduate program. And most of the students, even back then, in the dark ages, were college graduates, came to the school with college degrees. So they were exempt from class on Fridays, when the rest of us who were undergraduates had to learn biology, psychology, world literature, and all those things were taught by the same person.
Wow.
And you can imagine how sophisticated that material was. But in any event, shortly thereafter, the school became a graduate school. And yes, indeed, you not only have to have a music school background and a Hebrew background, but you have to have sufficient Judaic studies to write an essay that will convince an admissions committee that you will be the right kind of clergy person.
Yeah, I mean, I believe for my program it was 2 years, 2 years of college level Hebrew I had to have. It was a hard entrance exam. So and now
Absolutely.
they have the 5th year in Israel. The first year's in Israel, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
different too. It was a 4 year, and now it's a 5.
And,
Right.
and the Year in Israel program, which I'm too old to have taken advantage of, is famous for being really rigorous and really intense, and far more rigorous and intense for cantorial students than rabbinical students, because they just have all this music stuff in addition to their regular studies, in addition to learning to be fluent in Hebrew. So it's a lot, but the people who do it, and they're motivated to stick it out.
Right.
Great career. So
Sure is. It sure is. I feel blessed every day. I really do. I feel so lucky doing what I love to do. So what somebody wrote, what do you mean by the cusp of another revolution? Is that the music of newest song leaders or songwriters, or what do you mean by that?
first of all, I expressed that really badly, and I think what I was going for was, we've been in virtual worship, we've been in virtual sub communities for a year, and what's interesting is that if you zoom into a synagogue service, you'll see that there might be 300 people there. And it's not a big congregation. And ordinarily, I hear my colleagues saying, well, we would ordinarily get like 70 people on an Erev Shabbat, and fewer on a Shabbat morning if there was no kid becoming a B mitzvah. So, and the relatives from all over the country can attend a virtual B mitzvah. And it opens up all kinds of possibilities. So I think that the revolution is going to be, what does worship look like? And what does the synagogue look like? What do I derive as a Jew who wants meaning in her life? What do I derive from synagogue affiliation? And what should synagogue affiliation look like? And what should worship look like? And it's going to have to factor in everything that has been learned during the pandemic, and a lot has been learned. And it's statistical, you can track it. So it has to be plugged in. The good stuff has to be plugged in, and the bad stuff, God willing, will just go the way of the dinosaurs.
Okay, and we're getting down to the ending.
Yes, yes.
But I also wanted to ask you, Alice wanted to know, what temple did you grow up in which city?
So I grew up at what was called Oak Park Temple in Oak Park, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. And of course, it has a Hebrew name, but no one knew it or said it or would ever have alluded to its Hebrew name, which was B'nai Abraham Zion. It must have been a merger. But anyway, that's where I grew up, in suburban Chicago. And that's where I fell in love with the synagogue.
Okay, one last question. Biggest frustration, biggest reward?
You'd think I'd be ready for questions like that. That's a fantastic pairing of questions. The greatest frustration I've had in the cantorate is with myself, in that I didn't learn until too late that when I was with my children, I could say to a member of the congregation in the grocery store, my daughter referred to that, I could say, Mrs. Schwartz, I'm with my kids right now. So listen, if you just give me a call tomorrow, or email me tomorrow, I'll, but I used to, maybe in part trying to prove myself as a female cantor. Somebody wanted to talk to me in the grocery store, they had all my attention. And my kids would be like pulling at me and taking things off the shelves, eating whatever. But I was with that member of the congregation. And now younger clergy, and this has been the case for a long time, they realize that when they have family time, it is family time, and the synagogue supports that. The synagogue does not expect us to be married to the synagogue. The smart synagogues know that if their rabbis and cantors have fulfilling personal lives that are not constantly attenuated by congregational work, they will be better leaders. They will be better communal workers. So that was my greatest frustration, is that I didn't learn that until too late.
Right. Boundaries and all that. Right. So,
yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. And greatest reward.
Oh, the greatest reward. Oh my goodness. Well, sometimes I'm on calls like this and I see people from previous synagogue life. And I realize that, there is just nothing like, and this, Cantor Siegel, there's nothing like officiating at a wedding of a kid whom you taught, who was becoming bar mitzvah. And now he's the groom. And then you do the baby naming. I mean, I know this sounds cliche, but I have to say that holding the threads of people's life cycle events, it's a sacred trust. It doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't. I was going to say it does. I often say that at a life cycle event. It doesn't get better than that. Okay, I'm getting a little pressured about this, but okay, just really quickly, can you just say how you were treated in school in comparison to the male students?
I was condescended to by a few of the professors, and it was basically on the same theme as I evoked in the reading, which was, why are you really here? Didn't you just come here to get a husband? And that kind of thinking was prevalent back then. It wasn't even unusual. I didn't blink twice, but that was the general feeling, was that if you were a girl, and I was a girl then, in cantorial school, you were out for one thing, and that was just to find a husband. And the continuation of addressing us as boys. In addition to that, there were some professors who very clearly did not think they should be teaching women, because they did not think that women should become cantors. And that's because of the halachic prohibition against a woman leading people in mitzvot to which they themselves are not personally obligated. So since women don't have to pray 3 times a day, they can't lead prayer. Right. Anyway, so there was some of that very traditional bias against me. And also I was a hippie, and I don't think I rocked it. I think I flubbed it, and so I was ripe for the picking.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to let Karen quickly, because she's asking me. Karen, are you there? You want to say something?
Yes. I actually didn't have a question, but Barbara, while you were talking, I did take a peek at your Wikipedia page. And thank you, Lisa, for telling me to go there. And I just got to say, you're very open about your struggles with mental illness, and I mean, it's just raw. And I just want to see how much I admire you, because through all those struggles, you have sounds like had an amazing profession and have given so much to so many people. And so I think that's just a testament to your strength. And I just, I noticed you said in your Wikipedia that you speak about mental illness and anxiety and depression. And I just thank you for being that open. And so you've given back to the world, and it sounds like in so many ways. So no question, just want to thank you.
Thank you, Karen, very much.
And I would hope it, you know, I would think that it's a testament to your faith as well, that your faith has played a big role in, you know, your recovery, you know, and you know, addressing those issues as well. Yeah. Okay. I just want to. There's some beautiful comments here. I know Scott wrote how wonderful, how touching, how much you've touched his life and his family's life, and you know, you're loved. You're
If
beloved.
someone can send those to me, I send the chat to me. I do know how to participate in the chat. I'm actually rather good at it, and I'm a fast typist, but I have a rule that when I'm presenting, I do not multitask, because you never know what could go out the window. It'd probably be, you know, embarrassing for all of us. So I'm not going on the chat.
All right. Well, I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you on behalf of myself and our congregation and all of you who've been watching on Zoom and Facebook Live. Thank you so much for joining in. And Barbara, you're amazing. We love you, and we wish you, you know, only good things, only the best of health, and many blessings in the days and years ahead with you, for you and your family. And I just want to remind everybody that look for further announcements. Next time we have Cantor Jeff Klepper, another good friend, and one after that as well. So I hope you'll join us for part 2 and part 3 of the series. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. Erev Tov, everybody. Thank you again, Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You can stay on for a sec, Barbara, if you want.
Okay.
Anybody want to say something, they can.
Hi, Susan Adler-Wolf.
Thanks, Lisa, for putting this together. Really appreciate it. It's a joy to see you, and it's a joy to see Barbara as well.
Wonderful to see you, Scott.
Great.
You take care.
Mind blowing.
And I look forward to the rest of the series, Lisa. It's amazing. In fact, Jeff Klepper was brought by Temple Bethel in Great Neck for a concert in December 1976.
Whoa, how do you even remember? You're
I'm a
brilliant.